Great. So hello, everybody. My name is Victoria Sutherland, and I'm here with Michelle Shingler. We're both from Forward Reviews, which is a trade journal for independent presses to showcase their books through reviews. Michelle is the managing editor, and I'm the publisher founder. And the magazine was started in 1998. Brian invited us to speak to you today about the value of book reviews, and not only in the trade, which is what our comfort zone is primarily, but also niche markets, which are an interesting side to getting some additional sales for your book after you work the trade bit. I wanted to introduce Michelle a little bit. She started with us about 2.5 years ago. We found her in a library in Georgia. She was actually a reviewer for us for a long time, and she did such a great job that we contacted her when we were looking for managing an expanded editorial department need came up, and because she was so good, we felt very blessed to have her. As you can see why, she has a variety of degrees in English and theology from UGA and also Harvard Divinity School. She has worked for 4 years in a public library system, which is awesome for us, trying to figure out, what our readership is really very interested in. She started as the associate editor, and now she is the managing editor for Forward Reviews. And then me, I started Forward Magazine with a couple of other women, Marty Link and Ann Stanton, in 1998. Forward was a product of, a need that we saw in the marketplace, just as you probably are putting books together, where the trade that existed at the time in 1998 was not really paying much attention to indie presses. If they were spending time with them, it was not to the extent that I thought was reasonable given how many independent presses were out there. And I thought if we could provide a nice opportunity for them to get a review, it would also give our readership of librarians and booksellers access to great books from indie presses outside of the traditional book publishers, the big five actually, that were constantly getting trade coverage. So Marty Link was one of the other co-founders. She's now a New York Times bestselling author. And Ann Stanton, who is married to Doug Stanton, whose books and movies you might be familiar with, also a New York Times bestselling author. So we had some good bones to start the magazine with. I also had a degree in advertising from Michigan State and some other publishing coursework at New York University, Yale, and Stanford. I have another company that is a hostess, concierge service for children's book publishers at international trade shows, and I do some agenting for indie presses that need help getting their foreign rights sold. So what we thought we would cover with you today is the trade and niche market book reviews. Michelle's going to start the conversation with some examples of trade journals. She's going to talk a little bit about timelines and editorial calendars and why these are so important to getting your book noticed by the trade. Some submission guidelines, which will tell you what we're looking for when we choose books, when she chooses books to appear in the magazine, and what makes a good sell sheet or a tip sheet. She'll also talk with you a little bit about the importance of quality standards, and we'll both give you some suggestions for using your reviews after I speak to you a little bit about niche publications after she speaks to you on the trade.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. So some of the other top journals that do work similar to what we do include Booklist and Kirkus. Forward Reviews is special because we focus specifically on indie and university presses. We don't cover the big five presses. We want to give attention to the people traditionally ignored by those other presses. We hope to give you an idea of what makes Forward special and what makes our review process special. So let's see. So the difference between a trade journal and a consumer publication is that we are really targeting librarians, booksellers, people who want to get a very advanced picture of the books that are coming out that they'll want to have on their shelves for patrons or buyers. A consumer publication can wait a little longer, see how a book's doing in the waters with readerships, and then review it. But we're going very far in advance as opposed to some of the other publications.
And, you know, this it's going to be more of a conversation with Michelle and I as opposed to a presentation, so we're not interrupting each other. I just want to give our listeners a heads up that my 20 years in the business as opposed to her 5 years, I have a little bit more robust knowledge of the industry that I don't want some points to slip through. And what's important, too, is librarians and booksellers want the advanced information so that they can order books from their wholesalers, but we have to read the books before we give them a review. And so if we're not reviewing a book until after it comes out, it's not a new book for their purchasing options. They only want information on the new stuff. And so when I think you'll go into this a little bit more later, Michelle, by the time we get the book and the time we send it out to the book reviewer and the time they read it and send us back review with all the layers of editing that has to happen, I mean, that's primarily the reason why most trade journals need advance notice of your book. Absolutely.
Librarians want the book on the shelf day of release because people are already asking for it. It's helpful for them to read a consumer magazine after the fact so that you can have a conversation with your patrons about it, but for purchasing, advance is very important.
Plus, if you've already begun a marketing program and you're getting interviews on the radio and television, local television and newspapers, and there's a drive from the media to push patrons and customers into bookstores, and they're asking for the book, but the book isn't even there, that's the other reason why you want to get information to them early so that they can actually order the book before the demand happens.
Absolutely. So what we do is we think very hard about those booksellers and librarians when we're choosing books. We get about 1,200 books per submission period. We're doing a bi-monthly magazine, so that's a lot of books coming in our office. When we have a book in hand, we're thinking about those purchasers. What are their customers going to want to read? What are their patrons going to be most interested in? I'm always thinking partially as a Georgia public librarian, but I'm also thinking about libraries in New York City who have purchasing budgets that are huge, that can do more than small libraries can do. But it's that book that is going to get a lot of attention that people are going to want to read, and often with indie that's serving a purpose that no other books are serving at the time. So we're looking for unique, beautiful, and something that's going to hit the right hands that people are going to want to read. And then once we have those books whittled down, once we've chosen the perfect ones, we send them out to reviewers who are looking for that exact book. This is the person in the bookstore or a variation of the person in the bookstore who's going to request the title. I have someone who loves Russian literature, so anything like that I send to her. We have PhDs, anything that's specialized we send to the PhD students. I have someone who just likes quirky books, so I know when I get a great quirky book in my hand, if I give it to her, she's gonna talk about it in a way that readership will understand. We do look for established authors. For example, in coming issues, we're going to be highlighting Paul Offit, who's written about holistic health and some things to watch out for sorry, Victoria, do you know Paul? Do you know Paul Offit?
I don't.
Okay, so that was probably not the best example, but he's very specialized in his field, so that's going to be something that I know librarians are going to pick up, and we're excited to feature that. But also first-time writers who just write perfectly, who we know that people are going to be excited about for this book and future books. We're considering everything.
Right, and just a reminder to everybody, while we might be speaking about forwards guidelines and what we look at in a book, I'm pretty positive that this is the same thing that Library Journal, School Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, Kirkus are all taking into consideration when they choose books too, except they have a much bigger a group of people to choose from. We only do the indie press sector.
Yes, which I think is both, it's a lucky thing.
Right. Well, back in the day, you know, when we started 20 years ago, there were only 50,000 indie press books being published every year. Now, of course, we know that there's well over 1 million books being published every year. And that's what a trade journal serves the librarian and bookstore market as, because it's just impossible for them to be able to pick out what a great book is when there's so many being published. We help them, you know, we provide a cheat sheet for them basically by saying, these are the books that we've chosen that we think that you're going to love, and here's why.
Yes, which is extremely helpful when you're a library purchaser looking through the list of upcoming books, just not knowing. This list of 100 and something books every month is perfect for that. So let's see.
So what's in it for publishers? I'm just going to jump down to the database a bit, because this is also a really important point for authors and publishers to know that, and a lot of people don't know this. Most of the trade journals license their reviews to the database wholesalers at Ingram, Baker and Taylor, Bowker's Books and Print, EBSCO, Cengage, all of the places where librarians and booksellers go to purchase books. Librarians and booksellers do not call up individual publishers to say, oh my God, I just read a great review, I need 5 copies of your book for our, no. They call their wholesaler, and or actually they don't even call their wholesaler, they just go to the database and punch in the ISBN number, and the reviews will automatically come up. Most librarians, for instance, are not buying a book, and you can corroborate this, Michelle, unless there are reviews attached to the purchase order. Their limited budgets are dictated by public funds, and so they just can't order all the cat books they want just because they like cats. They have to have some patron requests, and they have to have some review documentation to go along with the purchase orders before they can spend the money. So having your books in the system happens when you get a book review from a trade magazine that reviews books, and that's like that's one of the #1 reasons why you should spend some effort making it easy for a librarian and a bookseller to find your book in their databases. Now, not so much with booksellers, but some librarians are going to Amazon if they need a book and they can't find it in their databases, but it's still not the first choice that they have when they're making purchases.
Absolutely. We're hearing at a lot of trade shows that what they need to see is 3 reviews at least from trusted sources that have pre-vetted these books for them. Someone writing on Amazon doesn't count for them as pre-vetting. They just know a little bit more about what the book's about. But when they see a review from us, they know that they can trust that it's a book that's going to matter to their patrons. We also do consider... Go ahead.
Oh, I'll just shut up. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm just so excited.
Me too. So something that you think about from the reviewer side, our reviewers all love to read. They get excited about the books that are in front of them. What we tell them to do is read a book carefully. They're giving you a little bit of summary, but they're also giving a very thorough critique. They're considering how well characters are written, how well, if it's a historical book, how well the time period's captured, the magic of the language. They're considering all these parts of a book. They're finding the things that stand out, and they're capturing that, which is a difficult job, but they do such a beautiful job at it in 300 to 400 words. Every book, every magazine. We look for lines in those books that are also things that can be blurbed that people can use on their book jackets. For us, that's a tremendous honor. It lets us know that the publisher has heard us, that they know that their book was heard, and that we can present this to their readers in a very persuasive way. They do consider whether or not the book has achieved the goal it set out for. That's an important thing to them as well. But these are pre-vetted books. When a book's in our magazine, we know that it's done something well. Their job is to find that and highlight it, and also to say where it can expand. Entertainment is something that we think about. Because there's so much enthusiasm behind these reviews, they are fun to read. That's something that we hear continually, and that I am personally very proud of our reviewers for, and proud of us for.
Sweet. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what the routine is for them, when they should think about sending it, what they should send, etc.
This is a great point, and something that's very important to consider. The saddest thing for me is when I get a book in the office that I love, but the publication date is in a couple of weeks and that magazine is already closed. So when to send is very important. We are asking for 3 to 4 month lead times. I would encourage thinking about even before that. We're happy to take digital copies, so what I tell people is as soon as it's in a form that is mostly finished, you can tell us that there are still going to be edits, and that's fine. That's something that we understand. But when it's in a finished form that you can share with us, send it. Send it with the tip sheet. Let us know when it's coming out so that we can place it with its appropriate magazine. That, and as far in advance as possible is what I encourage. But 3 to 4 months is a safe window. Following up,
it's also might be important to add here that if you are publishing your book with a publisher that might not be as well known as Oxford University Press or Source Books or Chicago Review of Books, it's important to us that we do see the cover of the book and and get an idea of the quality that is going to be in the packaging, because I'm sorry, people do judge books by their cover, and we want to make sure that everything that we include in the magazine, and I know the other trade journals do too, don't want to be encouraging librarians and booksellers to stock something that they're going to be embarrassed or, you know, are not going to meet trade standards, which means is all the metadata there? Is the BSU code correct? Is it the author's name and the copyright date fine? And, you know, is the cover art professionally done, or did somebody's, you know, niece do color something for them? Those sorts of things are very important for trade journals. Maybe not so much for consumers, because you can get a local pull or a local hook, and that quality is not quite so high. But for us, it's quite high.
That's absolutely true. That is the truism that bothers me the most, that you can't judge a book by your cover. You can most of the time. We know how much effort has gone in, what the marketing plan is already a little from the book cover. You get a great idea of what's to follow from the cover. So yes, that does need to be up front. Also, if you have a distributor, that's something that we need to know. We know with some of the publishers that they're going to be distributed in this particular way, but if you're working with Pub West or any of those distributors, that's something you want on your tip sheet so that we know that it's going to be easy for a librarian or a bookseller to pick up.
What about the PR publicity agencies? Are they helpful when you're, I mean, do you want to discuss that at all?
I would say it is helpful, especially with the publishing, the PR firms that we know. We know certain people in the industry understand what we're looking for. So it helps a little. That's another vetting process. It's like the cover. We know that we're getting something that's already been a little specialized or vetted for us and for our audience. So if you have a PR agency, yes, let us know. As much information about what you're going to be doing marketing-wise that you can give us, we would love to see. More is better.
And they're usually sending out a nice package too.
Yes. Yes.
They know the packages that everybody likes, and so we know that we're getting a good book when we get something from them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you've kind of talked about this a little bit, what trade journals look for in a book, but maybe we can just pick up a couple of items that we didn't address fully.
So we get the question of, do you want a hard copy or a digital copy a lot? My personal answer is that I don't mind either way. The truth is, of course, that reviewers and even us to a certain extent, we do like to see the hard copy. It gives us a little better of an idea of what the finished book is going to look like. But we also know that deadlines don't always work that way. So a lot of the industry is moving toward digital. We're happy to look at a digital copy. More is still better. So if you can get us a finished galley, do that. Digital is not going to count you out. Expertise, yeah, that's another important thing to include on your tip sheet. If you're in any way an expert in your topic, if you have a PhD, if you've written other books on the topic, include that on the tip sheet. We want to know that the person writing, especially nonfiction work, knows what they're talking about. That's going to be something that librarians and booksellers care about as well. It's definitely something that patrons and readers notice. You lose a lot of credibility, in nonfiction without expertise. We do need to know that. If it's something on a familiar topic, tell us how it's distinct. Don't just send, what are the books that you're tired of seeing, Victoria? What do you think? I'm trying to think of one that I can't take another one.
Well, World War II, I hate to be so terrible, I'm trying not to be insensitive.
I was going to say that too, but I didn't. Yeah.
There's a lot of books on, excuse me, aging.
Yes. And
that are not, that I guess what we're trying to recommend is go do some homework before you submit titles for review, or even think about doing a book. We want you to go to the bookstore, find out if there's 100 other books on the shelf that are addressing exactly the same thing that you are addressing. And if it is, maybe you want to think of a new twist or a new presentation for it, or otherwise think about publishing another book, because librarians won't, pay attention, or bookstores, if there's already some best-selling books out there. It would be difficult.
And there are genres that are saturated that way too. I was just thinking about memoirs. I just finished going through memoirs for one of our upcoming magazines. There's a question there of who your audience is. How is your story different from everyone else's? And that's really something that you need to emphasize when you write the book or send it in to us. Because if we can only cover so many memoirs an issue, it has to be something that stands out, that someone's going to pick up for a reason. So that's something we consider.
Next is why pre-pub is so important. We've already cut.
I'm sorry. We have already. Already covered that to some extent. So time-wise, that's important. We do let people know pretty quickly once their book has been chosen for a review. We let our entire team know the minute it's chosen for a review with internal communications, and then people start getting emails requesting cover art, requesting the correct metadata. So we're working with people who submit very closely to make sure everything is ready in time for the magazine to be completed. That includes sending reviews in for fact checks. We want to make sure that everything's perfect before it goes to editing. And there are many, many layers of editing. We read it internally, we send it out to a copy editor, we read it internally again, we give it to the publicist or the author. Everyone's checking these to make sure that they are ready for the library audience, ready for the bookseller audience.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we talked about is going over some sell sheets with you guys about what makes a good sell sheet. I was, as we were preparing for this meeting, I was telling Michelle about a great presentation I saw once live. Was the producer for Phil Donahue, who walked into the physical presentation stage with 3 bins of mail that he had gotten the day before the conference. And it was so interesting to all of us to see exactly what crosses his mind as he opens every piece of mail, including how much he hates particular envelopes because they make such a mess in his office. But for a consumer publication, it's a lot more important, I think, Michelle will agree, to send a bigger media kit full of all the reviews that you've gotten already and after the book is published. But for trade magazines, really, the less is more message is something I think we want to make clear with you.
Absolutely. We don't need bells and whistles. What we need is a very clear tip sheet and a beautiful book to peruse briefly and see if it's right for our audience. We get a lot of extras and envelopes. Those don't go to waste, but they also don't influence the book choosing process in any way. That's usually something that stays in the mailroom. What comes to me is the tip sheet and the book, and that's really all I'm concerned about. Because that's all ultimately that's going to make it to the reviewer, and that's all that we're going to be working with to let our audience know about the book. So the tip sheets that Victoria put together here are for books that we are covering. So these are things that stood out to us. This first press release is for one of the memoirs in our upcoming section. The first thing I'm looking for there is date. We knew that we were going to choose 8, and we knew that they had to be July to August region. So the first thing we're looking at is date. June 25th is technically outside the window, but because it's the last week, we knew that that was okay. It's a memoir about a young woman's experience. So the thing that Cora has to consider is what makes this different from other memoirs about young women's experiences. She's got a lot going on with global interactions with communities in trouble. So that's something that we know is on the tip of everyone's minds right now. It's significant. Her previous awards play in. That's also important for us to know because it lets us know that it's a literary work, which is very important for the genre, and that there's going to be something there that an inquisitive mind can latch onto and really get lost in. And that is, memoirs are difficult. So all of this is important for us. It helped us move past or move into the first chapter and then continue moving and know that it's right for the reviewer.
And you can see by the fold across her forehead that basically this is what appeared. This was shoved inside of the book, and that's all they needed to send for it to get chosen. Because the writing and the press release, the writing and the press or the sell sheet also speaks volumes.
Mm-hmm. So this is Brave Enough. It's a young adult book that, for me, from the sheet, sounded a lot like John Green and other novels that we know have done very well, but that we know is going to be empowering for young women, which is also quite important right now and quite something that librarians are looking for. This is going to make its way into young women's hands, into young men's hands, and it's going to make a difference. And they let you know that in a really short, persuasive blurb, a great cover. I know that's going to do well with YA audiences. The publication date's right out front. It's just doing everything right. Victoria, does anything stand out to you about this?
Well, I did want to point out the publication date. I mean, I think you got this a month and a half ago, and it's an August pub date. So that is how far the trade is working in advance to get books to us.
Yes. Really, really important.
Here's another one, very plain. You know, it's black. It was in black and white. You don't have to go crazy with color. You know, if the book is good, the editors will know it.
Yes.
But again, all the relevant information at the top. I mean, Michelle wants to know immediately the pub date. That's the very first thing I think that you look for. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Pub date is really, really important. I'm noticing this on here, and this should get mentioned. Contact information on the first sheet, very helpful. Sometimes we have to go digging for that, and we're not willing to. But it's a lot easier for our team if we know how to contact you right off the bat, so we can let you know you're being covered, request the final cover, make sure all of our metadata is in order. That's important.
So we debated whether to bring this up or not because FIFA reviews services have gotten a lot of bad press since they were introduced actually by us in 2001. But Michelle made a good point in that it's really, really important for people who do miss deadlines but need trade reviews to consider paying for a review from a good source, from a trusted source, and there are many of them out there right now. Kirkus, Blue Ink Reviews, Library Journal is doing a version. As long as it's trusted by the trade and they're licensed again by the same databases that are syndicating our magazine reviews, I think that it's not the ugly stepchild that it was when we first introduced this in 2001. Michelle can talk to you a little bit about the reviewers, but it's, you know, it's the same reviewers, and we insist on the same quality of the writing for the reviews. I mean, I would never jeopardize the reputation of our magazine by having a review go out that was of a good book when it really wasn't a good book. And of course, that's the first place people want to go. Well, you can't, you know, give a bad book a good review if people are paying for it. Well, yes, I can, and yes, we all can, because we've only been around for 20 years. Kirkus has been around for over, I think 100 years. They would never jeopardize their reputation by putting a good review out there for a book that wasn't good. But for the savvy publisher who said, I missed all the trade deadlines, but I really want to get into the databases that librarians use, this is a great inexpensive way for, number one, to get into those databases, but number two, to find out if you're super off target. You know, the reviewer will tell you, the critique will say that you had a lot of typos, you never really got the plot going, there's, the metadata was incorrect in the back, and you can make changes in enough time before publishing dates usually to make it worth your while. Did you have anything else to say about that, Michelle?
Just, I'm really proud of the job that we do with Clarion. Reviewers work as hard on these as they do on the magazine reviews. One of the benefits of a Clarion is that there's an expanded space for them to work in. So they're being not even more thorough, but they're covering more ground in a more specific way. They're letting you know each and every book how the characters present to the reader, how the story presents to the reader. Does everything resolve itself? What's the language like? They cover every bit of a book. They do it thoroughly. They do it honestly and diplomatically, but honesty is important. Like Victoria said, we do give negative reviews. I would say most of ours are 3, but we have a fair number of 2-star reviews that's just, it's honest. And we think of them as also helpful for writers to get to their next book. This is information that you can use. Now you know how your book has been received by your reader, and you know what to improve upon or what to change, or just that you're being read this way. It's just helpful to know that this is how people see it. And that's extremely useful, not only for getting your book into a librarian's hands, but for getting to your next work. I spend a lot of my day going over these reviews, and I'm very proud of the job that the reviewers do.
Great, yep. So we just we did want you to know about that because it's a part of today's publishing landscape, and it's an important one, especially for indie presses. So, here's just a little summary about trade. I think that we talked about, but we want to just hit home a little bit more. The cover art, the interior design, and the editorial assistance, getting somebody who has a professional background in editing is very, very important to the success of your long-term success of your book. Doing your homework and learning about trade journals before you send your book in is just as simple as going to their website, finding out when their submission, what the submission guidelines are, and everybody's pretty honest and transparent about that process. So we mentioned most of the trade journals at the beginning. It'd be worth going back and checking those out and visiting their websites. The tip sheets or the sales sheets are worth their weight in gold to busy editors. And that's worth another investment if you can. Don't try to put it together if you're not fluent in PDF, putting a PDF together, or just provide the verbiage that you need to a designer, a freelance designer, and they'll put something really nice together for you that will impress the reviewers as they're opening up your package. And finally, don't rush the process. I mean, it's not something, you can't get a book in the mail and a week and a half later expect somebody to get back with you about whether they're going to cover their review. In fact, nobody's going to get back with you about whether they got your book or if they're considering it. And I think that you may only hear back from a trade review journal if they're going to review your book. And maybe you can go out, talk a little bit about that, Michelle, about what we do here.
That is absolutely true. There's just not a way for us to get back to everyone, and it's 1,200 books every issue. That's a lot of letters to send out. So it's hard to check in and see if your book's getting covered. Send it in on time. Know that you've done everything right. That's going to work in your favor. I did want to add, personalizing the tip sheets doesn't hurt. If you know that we're covering, or that another journal is covering a specific subject for a specific issue, and your book fits that, let them know that you know that, and that also helps. Just being thorough is really important.
And, for larger publishing houses who send 10 or 15 titles a season to us, we are recommending that they put a sticky note on the cover reminding us which of the 15 are going to be their lead title. So if we are trying to make a decision between one or two of them, we'll know where they're, what they're putting their effort behind.
Yes.
So I just wanted to stick that picture in of our editor-in-chief, Matt Sutherland, who was, we grabbed him while I was picking up books for one issue. That's not, I can't even see into Michelle's office. This actually looks neat compared to Michelle's office.
That is very true.
So the next part of this presentation, which is not really what we do, but I can give you some general advice about niche markets and what the definition is. Once you get past the trade, it's time for you to start thinking about the consumer market. And usually, that's television, radio, newspaper, national publications. And a niche market means that you are very narrowly focused in on who the audience of your book is. We recommend that people avoid trying to be everything to everybody, because that's not the goal of niche marketing. You just want to try to become an expert in your particular category, and that way attract a lot more profitable customers with those particular interests to your title. One of the first ways to start with this is your BSU code, and in case you didn't know what your BSU heading is, it's a way for the industry to identify the subject of your book with a barcode on the back. It's represented by 9 characters, and There are, 3 or 4 numbers at the end, which will get to the very specific subject matter of your book. For instance, there are 52 major travel sections, or there's 52 major sections for subject lines, including computers and fiction and history and true crime. But if you start with one, for instance, that's travel, you want to be even more specific as you can. That's United States in the South, or the New Orleans or Disney World. As specific as you can get is a great way for you to start your niche marketing program. As I mentioned, business, for the example I'm going to show you in a few minutes, I went to the business BSU listing, and there were over 100 categories for business, including economics, business travel, crowdfunding, entrepreneurship, and such a wide array that you don't want to say it's just a business book if it's one on entrepreneurship and a librarian's looking for one on finance instead. So this is where it's important to start identifying your niche from the get-go. Some samples of niche publishing that I wanted to share with you. This one is a book that came here a couple weeks ago called or last year, I'm sorry, called The Launch Book. The metadata does say it's a business book, but she should have said on her sheet that it was for entrepreneurs. She's pretty amazing. She's on a mission to discover greatness in others, and it's her work. She's a CEO and an educator and a startup advisor and an author, and she's really busy on social media sites, and those qualities are gonna really work for her in a niche marketing space. So for instance, when she sends her book for review to consumer magazines like Entrepreneur, Forbes, Fast Company, Inc., Wired, The Accelerator, at Wall Street Journal, or the entrepreneurship section of the New York Times, her expertise level is going to come into play. Also, if she's gotten a review at a trade magazine already, she's going to want to include that in the press kit that she sends to these consumer publications. The next example I have is about backyard chickens, and you cannot believe how many chicken books there are in the world right now. But here's the subject is raising chickens. I went and looked at the BSU code for them, and it's under technology and engineering, agriculture, animal husbandry. Now, there are over a dozen chicken magazines in the United States, including the Chicken Whisperer, Raising Chickens, Backyard Poultry, Countryside, Chickens Magazine, and some other ideas to get your book noticed if you're doing backyard chickening is or local orchard reports on your NPR, IPR stations, and some television shows that are doing farming and things like that. She's an editor at a Backyard Poultry magazine and Countryside magazine, and so she sort of had an in to a market space that was dedicated to chickens, and these books are doing quite well. This will just give you an idea of the kind of information she can put on a tip sheet or sell sheet that she's sending out to these resources. And it's pretty likely, especially because it's focused and well packaged, that she's going to get good coverage based on her social media background and the columns that she writes for these publications. Some other things to consider when you're doing niche marketing is to fill out your keywords appropriately on Amazon and on your own websites, because those will help with your SEO, search engine optimization. And so you don't want to just come up with words that are inauthentic or try. I mean, people are on to you if you're just throwing words up there that are not as relevant to the market space as they should be. we urge you to be transparent and pick just perfectly good words that it'll increase your chances of getting noticed online. Finding bloggers are also a good opportunity for publishers who want to get the word out about their books. There's a lot of bloggers out there who have particular niches and a lot of followers. You want to find those bloggers who post other book reviews that you admire and not simply go for the numbers, or make sure that they're books that you respect, and you want to be a part of their interviews. And you can also write guest posts for those bloggers and help them do their jobs a little bit if you can see that they have a niche that is worth looking into. Any ideas that you might have, Michelle, that I might have overlooked in the niche space?
I actually think you did a perfect job with that. I don't have anything to add.
Okay. Well, just to summarize a little bit today, there is a timing issue as a difference between trade and niche book reviews. As Michelle mentioned, we need 3 to 6 months at least before we can get your book covered in a trade magazine, and I think we speak for most of the trade magazines out there, because it takes a long time to get the book read and edited before it appears in our journals. Especially in today's world with so many books being published, you want to make sure that the quality is as best as you can get it. Typos on the back cover, the word forward spelled incorrectly at the beginning of the book, just little things like this that you think may not be important are pretty critical to getting a spot in our publication, and I'm sure we're speaking the same for other trade journals. And lastly, I just wanted to say that the rise in self-publishing and independent publishing has been hard on a lot of people because they just wanted to be a writer. They're not really equipped to do marketing or social media and it's important for authors and publishers to understand the difference between the two before they embark on this adventure. If you're not really cut out for this, then you need to make some efforts to hiring professionals to help you do it. If you just want to go write another book, that's cool. Go do it. But it would be a shame for you not to hire somebody to help you get the first book out with marketing and good publicity to go with it. So keep that in mind as you're finishing up, putting the finishing touches on your books. We feel like we might probably have skipped a couple of things that were at the top of your mind, and we apologize if we didn't cover them, but we're open to getting an email from you if you think we did, or you have something else you'd like us to explain a little bit more robustly. There's our email addresses, and you can go to find our submission guidelines and deadlines at the website forwardreviews.com. Anything else, Michelle?
That's perfect.
Can't
wait to see your book.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time today. And again, let us know if you have any additional questions.